I'm Al Hunt.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to the voters in Kentucky and Oregon, tonight, you just might be trumped and outfoxed. What a show we have for you on this Semi-Super Tuesdays. Taking the stage tonight, Donald Trump's backup band, a mosh pit in Nevada, and a bluegrass showdown. But first, Hillary Clinton's opening act. There are primaries today in Kentucky and Oregon, the latter of which votes all by mail. But this news cycle has been mostly driven by two new TV ads that were unveiled late last night by Priorities USA. That's the super PAC that is supporting Hillary Clinton's campaign. Here's one of those ads. People have been talking about it all day, which uses Trump's own words specifically about women against him.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. Does she have a good body? No. Does she have a fat ass? Absolutely.
You like girls that are 5'1", they come up to you know where.
If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
I view a person who's flat-chested is very hard to be a 10.
And you can tell them to go themselves.
Does Donald Trump really speak for you?
The other Priorities TV ad has a similar message. It shows Trump saying he would cut off funding for Planned Parenthood and that women should be punished for getting abortions if the procedure was banned. The group will reportedly spend $6 million on these spots between now and June 8th in the key battleground states of Ohio, Florida, Virginia, and Nevada. Today, in response, Trump unleashed a Twitter storm about these ads, defending himself and issuing what seemed like some warnings. He wrote, quote, "The pathetic new hit ad against me misrepresents the final line. You can tell them to go blank themselves was about China, not women." And another tweet, amazing that crooked Hillary can do a hit ad on me concerning women when her husband was the worst abuser of women in U.S. political history. So Al, Hillary Clinton's allies are picking a fight about women. Trump warned a while ago that if her team did that, he would counterpunch hard, including on Bill Clinton's personal life. Is it smart for Team Hillary to pick this fight now?
Yeah, I think so, Mark, because they really didn't have a choice. If they played nice with Donald, he's not going to play nice with them, and that's what they realized. They think he's very vulnerable here. We had an online poll about a month or so ago which, suggested the same with women. These ads are very similar to the ads that Republican Katie Packard did when they were trying to stop Trump a couple months ago. They weren't very effective. I think the super PAC people, I know, will argue we're reaching a different audience. It's a general election audience in these four states, and it will just, they believe at least, reaffirm doubts people, the women particularly, have about Trump. This is the first of a series. They'll do this. They'll do national security, Trump's business failures, and some other stuff. It's going to be very, very negative. Bring the children and dogs in.
I may be missing something, but I'm really surprised they led this way. They're leading on something that's personal, and that involves gender, knowing full well that Trump now will take this, as he already has, to DEFCON whatever, and they lose the high ground, it seems to me, of saying we want this election to be about the economy, to be about the middle class, to be about the working class. These issues clearly will have an audience. These issues clearly will energize people, but I can't imagine why they didn't lead with either national security or the economy when they had plenty of time to get these spots ready.
Well, I think they want to make sure that Trump doesn't have any kind of a comeback right now, and there's some polls that indicate that there is some rallying around. It is the super PAC. I think they clearly are representing her. I think it's just going to be negative from now to November, Mark.
I agree, but the idea, and again, I'll just say, why not start on the economy? Why not start where you say you want the race to be?
Well, you may be right on that. Let's turn to the other Clinton. Potential future economy czar, Bill Clinton, was in Puerto Rico today. He had some things to say about the debt crisis there, but also addressed for the first time publicly the advisory role he might play if Hillary Clinton reaches the White House.
I have asked, actually, to be given the job of trying to help every part of the United States that has been left out and left behind economically.
During a campaign stop in Kentucky yesterday, Hillary Clinton took the chance to not just promote her own economic message, but mock Donald Trump's as well.
Here's the question. So what is your plan to create jobs? His answer is, I'm going to create them They're going to be great. I know how to do it, but I'm not telling you what it is I'm going to do.
Today, Trump returned to his favorite social media microphone and tweeted, quote, "How can crooked Hillary put her husband in charge of the economy when he was responsible for NAFTA, the worst economic deal in U.S. history?" Mark, Clinton's advisors say that in the end, she's going to make the case that she's better for working class families than Trump. Which of her proposals best makes that case?
I think she's got to talk about college affordability and anything she's got in her arsenal to raise the incomes of working and middle class families. I don't know what those proposals are. I've looked at her website. There's nothing to me that sort of seems new and fresh and will break through, and nothing that paints her as someone who can unify the country around her proposals the way previous presidents have. So I'm not sure exactly what they are, but when her campaign says, as I said in the first topic, they want to make this about the economy, it seems like they should have some specifics right today to say, Hillary's for this, Donald Trump's for this, that's what voters should vote on, and I just don't hear that out of them.
Well, you know, Mark, I basically agree with you. What her plan really is the 2016 version of putting families first, the 1992 Bill Clinton. And she does have specifics. She has a middle-class tax cut, paid leave. You mentioned free public education in-state, less than Bernie, and there are other things, child care. But you're right, it doesn't excite. And so far, the candidate and the campaign, I think, have not done a very effective job of telling people, here's what we would do for you, middle-class struggling families.
Not only does it not excite, but you can watch her events, watch her appearances. She's not talking about it with the kind of message discipline Bill Clinton did about his economic agenda or George Bush did about hers. Barack Obama was vague too, but then when the economic crisis happened, he had his chance to step up. I'm really surprised that they're not focused like a laser beam on the economy, to borrow the phrase from 1992. All right. Today, in an interview at the Washington Post that was published today, Donald Trump said he was planning a PR campaign to rehabilitate his public image in the coming weeks by addressing some of the bad headlines he's garnered head on. Trump put that strategy to the test immediately. Within the same interview, the billionaire builder brought up on his own a controversy from months ago when he appeared to be mocking the physical disability of a New York Times reporter, Serge Kovaleski. Trump told the Post, quote, "I would never say anything bad about a person that has a disability. I swear to you it's true, 100% true." Who would do that to the handicapped? I've spent a lot of money making buildings accessible. All right, so to remind you of the context here of what Trump's talking about, this is the original set of remarks from November.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said.
So the reporter in question does have a disability, and Trump claims that was not what that imitation was about at all. He also claimed he didn't know the reporter, even though they had a history together. So, Al, how convincing do you find Donald Trump's attempts today to try to diffuse this issue?
Not the least bit. He's lying, Mark, to put it simply. I've watched this tape dozens of times. I've talked to Serge Kovaleski, the reporter. I have a son with disabilities, so we're sensitive to these issues. There is no doubt that Trump knew he was ridiculing the reporter. That's clear from the tape. He was upset with the story. He went on, as you said, to deny he even knew Kovaleski, who had interviewed him multiple times, one time for 2 hours with another reporter in Trump's office, had ridden on the Trump shuttle PR thing with the Donald, and Kovaleski and others said there's no doubt that Trump knew who he was. Serge has decided disabilities. You don't forget that. This was maybe the cruelest thing that Trump has done in this campaign. And, you know, the focus groups from the Clinton Super PAC show this resonates more than any other issue. My guess is that Trump has data that shows that, too.
Yep, and I bet he's got it anecdotally, too, Al, the way you probably do and the way I do. When I talk to people about all the things Trump has said that have offended one group or another, that comment and that performance really has resonated with a lot of people, not just people who know someone or have a family member with a disability, but people think the cruelty of what they saw there is beyond the pale. It's beyond the notion of politically incorrect. It's beyond the notion of an offhanded remark.
Yeah, and he could have just come back. He could have called Serge, apologized, said, look, I got carried away. I was a man about a story. And people wouldn't have liked it, but they would have forgotten it. But to double down on this demonstrable lie is something, this is not going to go away. I suspect you'll see a Clinton Super PAC ad on this one too, Mark.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, up next, there was chaos at the Democratic convention in Nevada this weekend. Bernie Sanders' surprising response to all the hullabaloo around that today after these words from our sponsors. The aftermath from a chaotic Democratic Party convention in Nevada this weekend reached new dramatic heights today. If you haven't been following the story, here's a quick Cliff Notes version. Hillary Clinton won the Nevada caucuses back in February, but that hasn't stopped the Sanders folks from trying to pick up a few more delegates at the state convention, which occurred Saturday. Those potential Sanders delegates and their backers clashed with party leaders after a spirited rules fight led security to shut down the gathering early. Reportedly, there were some chairs thrown as the team supporting Sanders complained they were getting steamrolled by pro-Clinton forces associated with the party bosses. Since then, some of the Silver State superdelegates and the state party's officials said they've been receiving death threats from angry Bernie fans. Addressing reporters a few hours ago on Capitol Hill, Nevada Senator Harry Reid said the confrontation was a, quote, test of leadership for Sanders. The two of them spoke today. Reid said after they spoke that he was confident that the Vermont senator would soon be releasing a statement addressing the matter, and boy, did he ever. This is an incredible statement, folks. Sanders was emphatically unapologetic in this statement. He took the opportunity to deride Democratic leaders for not welcoming new, energetic voters into the party, and he defended his backers wholeheartedly. He did, kind of as an aside, denounce violence, but it was not, I suspect, what Harry Reid and the Clinton folks and the state party folks out there were expecting. The state party officials that put out a statement pushing back on Sanders, accusing him of misrepresenting the situation. So, Al, what does this dust up in that one state mean for potential unity between Clinton and Sanders?
Mark, I've been downplaying the tension in this contest, but I think this changes it. This was really ugly, and she's going to be the nominee. She needs the Sanders people. They can't sit on their hands. They can't be. They can't feel like they've been disrespected. And I'll tell you the other thing I think it does. The longer this goes on, the tenser it becomes. What it may force her to do is pick Elizabeth Warren as her running mate, which I don't think she relishes.
Yeah, I don't think she relishes. I don't think she'll do it. I got to say, this is making me harken back to talks I had with Bernie supporters in Iowa and New Hampshire. And I would ask Sanders supporters and Clinton supporters, I say the Clinton supporters, hey, if Bernie Sanders ends up winning, how would you feel? They'd be like, well, great. He's really inspirational. We really like him. And almost to a person, when I asked the Clinton supporters, even young people who look perfectly friendly, I'd say to them, what do you think about Hillary Clinton? They would spew vile. They do not like her. They do not feel good about her being the nominee. And that's not true of all her supporters. But I agree with you. This represents both the symbolism of where we are and a reflection of where we are. And I think it's going to make things raw. And Sanders' statement is extraordinary. This is about his message, his vision, his backers. It is not about bringing the party together. And I suspect that this is more than just a small setback.
Yeah, I think you're right. Harry Reid obviously couldn't get to Bernie Sanders. Yeah. This is where they probably need a Ted Kennedy, and they don't have one.
That's right. All right, we'll see if maybe some other Democratic senator can step up where Senator Reid apparently, at least for now, has failed. As we mentioned, today is a voting day. It's primary election day in Oregon where they vote by mail. Also, Democrats are voting in Kentucky. That is another coal country state that seems to be posing some problem for Hillary Clinton. She, of course, lost both West Virginia and Indiana earlier this month. Sanders has outspent Clinton on Kentucky airwaves, not uncommon. He's got money still. And a loss for Clinton would represent the first time she's lost a fully closed primary state. She's won all the others where it's been Democrats only, so that would make it a bad loss if she does lose. Sanders, if he wins both today, will have won 21 contests overall. That compares to Clinton's 26, with more coming that Sanders could win next month. So, Al, the Clinton campaign seems more hopeful that they can pull this one out tonight. But if Clinton loses Kentucky, does it matter?
Well, I think it does now, Mark. Going back to what we were just talking about, she can ill afford another loss because it just, I think, heightens the tension. And Kentucky is a state, as you said, it's a closed primary. Look, if she wins the general election by 10 points, she's going to lose Kentucky. So it doesn't have anything to do with the general election. It has to do with somehow finding a way to get out of this primary struggle in the best possible shape. And the last couple of days have not been helpful in that regard.
If she loses another coal state, if she loses a state where it's Democrats only, if she loses a state where the economy and working class voters are a big deal, if she loses a state at this point when she is the presumptive nominee, all that is just bad news. And of course, the closer Bernie Sanders gets to matching her, not in the popular vote where she will win, but the closer he gets to matching her in states won, the more he will be emboldened, I think, to really dig in at the convention and maybe make asks for things that she just can't deliver on.
Yeah, I think that's right. This is a contest that they thought would be over by now. Very few people thought the Republican contest would be settled before the Democratic one. And, you know, you're not always, but you can pay a price for that.
Up next, we get all the answers from Jeff Weaver. He's Bernie Sanders' campaign manager. He'll explain to us about the Nevada situation, what happens after tonight, and more after this quick break. Waiting to be flooded with returns from the races in Oregon and Kentucky tonight. So in the meantime, we want to bring in someone who's also waiting patiently, we assume, for the results. Joining us now from Burlington, Vermont, Bernie Sanders campaign manager, Jeff Weaver, who joins us again. Jeff, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
We were pretty surprised by Senator Sanders' statement on Nevada and his calling out what he thought was bad practices. Just tell people, what's the worst thing that happened on Saturday that really voters should know about around the country and care about?
Well, I mean, the way the convention started, I think if you watch the video online, you can see it. And this was confirmed by people like Senator Nina Turner, who was there in the room, who's a former senator from Ohio. When they tried to pass temporary rules to shut off debate in the event, they were asked for the yeas and nays. You know, a voice vote. People in the room pretty clearly said that the nays won it. At worst, it was indecisive, and yet the chair overruled them, said the ayes had it, and then proceeded, you know, to run the convention under these modified temporary rules, which were designed to sort of foreclose debate.
So what's the difference between the outcome that exists now and the outcome that you think would have existed had the thing been run, from your point of view, fairly?
Well, I'm not sure how the outcome would have been different, Mark, but I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is there's a huge segment of the Democratic Party going to be treated with fairness, and I don't think that happened in Nevada, based on everybody that I have talked to. You know, the Bernie Sanders has run in states all across this country, and by and large, state Democratic parties have been extremely fair and tried to be even-handed, and that just was not the experience in Nevada, either at the state level or, you know, if you look back at the Clark County convention that happened recently, where they tried to depose against their own rules, their own credentials chair, and almost had her arrested because there was a perception that she was being too fair to the Sanders people. So there's been this is not just Saturday, it was a lot of events leading up to it. I think there was a lot of frustration. Obviously, our campaign condemns any suggestion of violence or threats, but clearly there has been a level of unfairness in Nevada that we have not seen in other states.
Jeff, this is Al Hunt here. Let me ask you, tell us about the Harry Reid, Bernie Sanders conversation.
Well, I don't really talk about people's conversations. I know they've had a couple of conversations. I think they're positive conversations. You know, they're friends. They've served with each other in the Senate for many, many years. I think there's a lot of mutual respect. But, you know, I'm not really going to get into
No, but Senator Reid clearly didn't anticipate what Senator Sanders said this afternoon. I mean, it was obvious in what Senator Reid said beforehand.
Right. Well, you know, what Senator Sanders said is he obviously condemns violence. He wants the people who support him to be treated fairly. There's 9 million people, over 9 million people in this country who have supported him. There certainly is resistance among some establishment players in the Democratic Party, whether they be in the Nevada State Party or certainly at the national, at the DNC, who are not as welcoming of all of these new people who've come into the process. All these young people, democratically aligned independents in many cases, who have come out and supported Senator Sanders' message to deal with corrupt campaign finance system and a rigged economy. So, there's some.
Do you include Brooklyn Do you include Brooklyn and the Clinton campaign in that criticism?
No, I mean, the Clinton campaign has not weighed in on this per se, but obviously, I think people perceive themselves as operating in the interests of the Clinton campaign.
Jeff, given the success you've already had and are likely to have in the remaining contests, is it fair to say now that you're going to go to the convention with the posture of trying to do everything you can to win over superdelegates in Philadelphia, and so Philadelphia will be more about, or at least partially about, fighting still for the nomination rather than coming together behind Secretary Clinton and fighting Donald Trump? Is that fair to say?
Well, I think what it's fair to say is whoever comes out of the convention as the nominee, I think will come out with a united party that is prepared to take on Trump and the Republicans. I think that is certainly fair to say. This process has a long way to go. I mean, we'll see how the final states go. If the delegate margin can be narrowed substantially, I think that there certainly will be an appeal to superdelegates. I think the senator has said that himself. But there are other issues as well at the convention that have to be dealt with, including the platform and including looking for ways to open up the nominating process and to deal with many of the things that we've seen over the course of the year in the various states that are often, not a result of malice, but just sort of institutional impediments to people being able to fully participate in the democratic process.
I'm not trying to instigate a fight here, but it just seems to me you all have had enough success, no matter what happens tonight, even almost no matter what happens in June, that your posture seems to be, and I'm just trying to confirm that the convention is about having disputes about who the nominee is going to be, who the superdelegates should vote for, what should be in the platform, should the rules of how Democrats nominate their candidates in the future, that's for you all, that's what Philadelphia is about, more than uniting in the beginning of the convention behind Hillary Clinton. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think at this point that's exactly right. I mean, the convention is about nominating the candidate of the Democratic Party for President of the United States. That's the whole point of the convention.
Right. So you go into that, you're not looking forward to showing up in Philadelphia if Hillary Clinton seems anointed by the media. You're not looking forward to showing up in Philadelphia from day one and saying, let's figure out when Senator Sanders is going to give his big speech endorsing her. Is that?
Well, let's be clear. The media anointed Secretary Clinton the day that Senator Sanders announced his candidacy. I mean, this has always been an uphill fight, and he has said repeatedly he is going all the way to the convention. So you don't need to hear it from me. He said it repeatedly. I mean.
Jeff, give us one or two of the most important platform planks for the Sanders campaign.
Well, I think there are many of the issues that he's been talking about. A universal health care through a single-payer system, $15 minimum wage, free tuition at public colleges and universities, dealing with a broken trade policy. I mean, I could go on, but those are the sort of dealing with climate change.
Okay, Jeff
That's
Weaver.
a big list.
Jeff, last question, got to be a quick one.
Sure, of course. Always.
What adjective would you use to describe the mood in your headquarters right now?
I think determined. I think would be would be the adjective I would use.
Very determined leader, Jeff Weaver. Jeff, thank you. Coming up, we're bringing in the gold standard to talk about Donald Trump's fundraising. Matea Gold of the Washington Post joins us after these words from our sponsors. Joining us now from the spanking new Washington Post newsroom, Matea Gold, who wrote a story about the chaotic scramble to set up pro-Trump super PACs to try to compete with Hillary Clinton's well-funded allies. Matea's story says, in part, quote, the dynamic has triggered a rush to identify the right organization to harness Trump's rich allies and run a sophisticated independent campaign. Two rival super PACs are in the mix, but both are newly formed and are viewed with skepticism by major donors and their advisors. The free-for-all environment alarms veteran party strategists who have recently signed on to try to help Trump win the White House. Matea, thank you for joining us. Great story. Let me ask you about one thing that stuck out in your story. You got a response from Corey Lewandowski, the campaign manager, basically saying Mr. Trump still doesn't really like super PACs. So is that a bit of a fiction, or are they actually happy these things are happening?
Well, I think we're seeing really conflicting messages coming out of the Trump campaign, both from the candidate and his advisors. They maintain that he disavows all super PACs, even though I've been able to determine that some top Trump advisors have been actually frantically seeking strategists to set up an entity that they feel would be a professional operation that could harness these huge sums that are likely to come in from wealthy Trump supporters. So that part of the public posture is contributing to the confusion in this environment. You know, Trump took a really hard line against super PACs throughout the primary and really, beat up his opponents like Ted Cruz for being supported by them. Now I think there's an acknowledgement inside the campaign they have to have some sort of outside entity that can take in these big donations, but they just don't know what that entity will be at this point.
And these two super PACs, as they start to think about raising and then spending, are they dreaming of $2 million checks, $3 million checks, $10 million checks?
Oh, I'm sure they'll take 8 figures and happily put those to work. Both of those groups have said that they want to raise as much as $100 million, which, is actually doable. We've seen some of these super PACs bring in these incredible sums just from a couple donors. I mean, Ted Cruz's super PACs were able to bring in $10, $15 million contributions from just a group of members of a single family. So while the sums are not, I think, out of reach, I think the real question now is the organization and what strategists are going to be trusted with this money.
Hi, Matea. It's Al Hunt. First of all, I'm a huge fan of your writing on money and politics. You just do a fabulous job. Let me. You say it really has to do with organization, because are a lot of the fat cats? I saw Sheldon Adelson said he's going to devote up to $100 million. Are most of the big money people coming around now to Trump?
I wouldn't necessarily say most of the big money people, but one thing that is really fascinating is we've seen a real involvement in political activity by wealthy people who never had engaged in campaigns up until a few cycles ago. So there is plenty of money to be had out there, and Trump clearly has relationships with very wealthy people that he can tap. In some ways, financing outside super PACs for him is easier than financing the hard money for the campaign. I mean, it won't take much to have a well-funded super PAC if you get a couple billionaires to step up to the plate, because there are no limits on what they can give. Fundraising for the campaign and the party is a harder lift because of those limits, and I think that's going to be actually the real test of Trump's organization.
And one of the reasons, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he needs those super PACs is because most people who know Trump and his finances don't think that he has the money to throw $1 billion, or he's not liquid enough to throw $1 billion into this campaign. Is that what you hear?
Well, he actually sort of alluded to this a week ago when he said, I guess I could sell a couple buildings and self-fund, suggesting that he does not have the cash really readily available to immediately inject in the campaign. And he said he wants to raise $1 billion in conjunction with the RNC, which is an incredibly steep goal. I mean, that would be $250 million a month for the next 5 months. It's hard to see how they reach that. So I think he actually is going to be incredibly dependent on a well-funded outside super PAC or multiple groups that can pick up some of the slack that his campaign won't be able to do.
So, Matea, just go back to the first question again in a little slightly different way. Sometimes donors don't want to give to the super PAC because they're not sure they'll spend the money wisely. Sometimes they're worried that the candidate won't necessarily like it. Sometimes they want to make sure they're with the kind of official or semi-official enterprise. Are all those reasons at play here as donors are hesitating?
All of those questions are still unanswered. I mean, most donors now have read Trump's language on super PACs and some of the softer posture he's taken in the last week in some media interviews as a sign that he really does want these. So I think there's less ambivalence about whether they would be in trouble with him, so to speak, if they pursued it. And, if you notice, Trump himself tweeted a link to the story referring to Sheldon Adelson's pledge to spend up to $100 million. So that seemed to be, at minimum, a tacit acknowledgement that this money was going to be out there supporting him. But the real, I think, unanswered question is who they can trust with their money. And donors are incredibly skeptical now about a lot of these outfits that sort of crop up out of nowhere and say that they'll take their money and put them into TV ads.
Okay, Matea Gold, Washington Post, great story, and as Al said, great coverage of this really important beat. Thank you. When we come back, a guy who was fighting the rigged political system long before Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, system he calls rigged, and his effort to recruit more independent candidates. We'll have that for you in a second. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM live every day, and we'll be right back. There's been a lot of talk this presidential campaign season about allegedly rigged political systems and about potential third-party challengers to try to shake things up. These issues are nothing new for our next guest, Greg Orman, a Kansas businessman who, you might recall, mounted an unsuccessful independent bid against Senator Pat Roberts, the Republican, in 2014. Orman's now written a book called The Declaration of Independence: How We Can Break the Two-Party Stranglehold and Restore the American Dream. Recently, I sat down with Orman. I started out by asking him what he learned from his third-party run about how the current system works for our democracy.
I learned a lot, not just about the two-party system and our democracy, but about what voters want and what voters care about. And it was clear to me in running that, in fact, voters feel like they've been presented a series of false choices. And voters feel like the two parties really ultimately don't care about them. And I think we're seeing a lot of that reflected in the unconventional choices that they're making in this presidential season.
Doesn't the fact that those two unconventional choices, Bernie Sanders, who's done very well, although he probably won't be the nominee, Donald Trump, who's won his party's nomination, doesn't that suggest that the two-party system can accommodate outsiders who are not part of the party system, since neither of those guys was a member of the party they ran in until just recently?
Well, you know, and what we saw happen with Ryan and Trump meeting, I think, is an example of how eventually the system co-opts them all. You know, Trump ran as a Republican. He got Republican votes, but he's now trying to co-opt the Republican finance system and raise $1 billion for his campaign through the party. So when he goes to Washington, D.C., he's going to go there as a Republican who has obligations to the Republican Party, and maybe more importantly, he's going to go there perceived by Democrats as someone that they can't trust. Because that's what the two-party system has devolved to. We've gotten to the point where both parties don't trust each other. And so they spend their time focused more on seeing the other party fail than they do in seeing our country succeed. And if you read my book, what you see is that we have gotten to a point where a lot of the most partisan folks in both parties consider the other party evil. And when you consider the other party evil, by definition, any compromise becomes a deal with the devil. And I think that's what we would see in a President Trump or a President Clinton. I think even if they extended an olive branch, the other side would look incredibly skeptically at that. If you look at the last 25 years in American politics, and you know, John Heilman said this the other day, we've had three presidents, two-term presidents elected, all talking about some nature, some desire to be post-partisan. Bill Clinton talked about a third way. Actually, George Bush went to the Democratic House meeting, their off-site meeting, and talked to him about the fact that he wanted to work with them. We saw Barack Obama talking about becoming a post-partisan president. The reality is, both parties are so invested in partisanship that even when the leaders of their own party extend an olive branch, the other party rejects it. It doesn't matter who the president is, and that's one of the reasons I've called for more independence. I believe independents are an essential element of our problem-solving process, and if we don't have them, I think fundamentally we're going to continue to be guided by mistrust between the parties and a lack of accomplishment for the American people.
So if you and the like-minded colleagues you're working with have your way, don't go all the way to utopia, but what would the country look like in 10 years in terms of how government would function? In other words, if lots of independents got elected, House and Senate, what would it look like? How would things be different?
Well, I've said this often, that I believe whoever the next president is, that they would be better off with 5 independent senators than they would with 5 senators from their own party. Because those independent senators, for that president who did want to extend an olive branch, could serve as a bridge between the two parties. In fact, I've often likened it to a couple going through a bitter divorce. You know, they don't talk to each other anymore. They don't trust each other. They question each other's intent. And, you know, sending Democrats and Republicans to Washington and asking them to solve our problem is a little bit like putting that bitter divorcing couple in a room and saying, figure it out. It's not going to happen without a catalyst like independence to come and be able to help both sides bridge their differences.
They'd have to be truly independent. If you'd gotten elected, you would have probably caucused with the Democrats, right?
No, actually, no.
You would have stayed. You would have been a member of neither caucus.
What I said, and I said this consistently in our election, is ultimately, if one party or the other is clearly in the majority, then it's in the best interest of my state of Kansas for me to caucus with the majority.
Right.
But if I were in a position where we got to decide the majority and decide who held the chairman's gavels, what I would have done is gone to both sides and said, we need to engage in a pro-problem-solving agenda.
So you'd need some luck, at least in the early phase, that the balance of power was such that people who were elected as independents would have the ability to say to both parties, you need to appeal to us. But is it possible for somebody who's an independent in the Senate to not join a caucus, and to float? Or do you just give up too much power that way? No committee assignments, no ability to be part of the benefits that come with being part of one team or the other?
Well, I mean, if you look at what's happened, the 113th Congress passed as eighth as many bills as the do-nothing Congress that Harry Truman ran against in 1948. The fact of the matter is, without doing something different, Washington is going to continue to be besieged by gridlock, and not a whole lot's going to get done. So I don't know how valuable it is to sit on a committee that gets nothing done.
Our thanks to Greg Orman. When we come back, we're joined by director Jay Roach to talk about his latest project and what it means for your daily commute, traffic, and weather together right after this.
Come on. Goldwater gets elected, you can forget about poverty. You can forget about civil rights. Is that what you want? Now, I'm trying to turn this country around and prevent a major war. Christ, why the hell did I ever consider you for my vice president? First sign of trouble, you cut and run.
That was a scene from the film Brand New All the Way, which is based on the Tony Award-winning play about President Lyndon Johnson. It debuts on HBO this Sunday at 8 p.m. Joining us now is the director of the movie, Jay Roach. Jay, we're going to watch another clip, then we're going to talk about the incredible film you've made.
Great.
This clip depicts Johnson discussing the Civil Rights Bill with his Vice President, Hubert Humphrey.
You told Dr. King you wanted this bill passed without one word change.
You don't go and sell a horse by talking about it being blind in one eye and got the heat.
They're gonna think you're just gutting the bill, sir.
Bull. This ain't about principles. It's about votes. You know that's the problem with you goddamn liberals. You don't know how to fight.
So Jay Roach has made another great film about America. This one with, I say, if not our greatest actor today, one of our greatest actors. Tell us about why you were interested in LBJ, because you like interesting characters. Why were you so interested in him?
Well, he's a complex guy, an unbelievable politician, someone who actually believes you can do things with government, and he got a huge amount done. We sort of forget, looking back through Vietnam, looking backwards to what he accomplished in 64 and 65 and 66. One of the most important things he accomplished was the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, and to take that on at that time when he was seen as the accidental president after JFK's assassination just seemed like an incredible story.
And Bryan Cranston inhabits LBJ.
To an unbelievable degree. He channels him, he got his physicality, and we got his look. It's pretty amazing to watch. I can say that.
Jay, it's Al Hunt. I saw the movie last night at the National Archives. It was absolutely brilliant. And you were so right about Cranston. There would be times where you would see, Cranston, and then you would go back to an LBJ scene in '64, and you weren't sure which was LBJ and which was Cranston. And I also thought the Lady Bird and the Richard Russell and the J. Edgar Hoover were absolutely phenomenal. How much were you guided, both the play and the movie, by Robert Caro's great works on Lyndon Johnson?
Well, Robert Schenken, our playwright, became our screenwriter. He did the adaptation himself of his own Tony-winning play. So he had done most of the research before the play. I got to inherit that, but then we did a lot of our own research. We went out and spoke to a number of people who were there directly, a number of the civil rights leaders, Congressman John Lewis, Congressman Jim Clyburn. Ambassador Andrew Young was a consultant on our film, as well as a number of the people in the Johnson administration at the time.
You mentioned Vietnam earlier. Lyndon Johnson does very poorly when he asked about the public's view of presidents. I don't think there's an airport in the country named after him because it's all Vietnam. Do you think that this will begin to educate people on the fact that there was another side of Lyndon Johnson that probably did more great works than any president since Roosevelt?
You know, that's how I usually describe it. I had forgotten. I was like 10 or 11 years old in '68 when he decided not to run again due to the unpopularity of the war. And I had forgotten. And you look at the work he did in '64, '65, '66, Medicare, Medicaid, quadrupling the foreign financing, national financing of education, and NPR, PBS. He passed more legislation in those few years than almost any president had since, as you said, since FDR. And I think what people will notice when you watch the film is just what it's like for someone who actually believes government can improve the quality of lives of Americans and has spent his whole life learning how to do that and did it incredibly well during those early years.
This film has an incredible cast, and you've worked with lots of great people, but I'm just obsessed with Bryan Cranston these days. Between Breaking Bad and the 2 films you've now done with him, I know this is like the most basic question to ever ask a director about an actor, but what makes him so good at this?
Well, I think one of the great things that happened to him is he didn't become famous right away early in his career. He was a great character actor for so many years. I like to work with actors who are great at drama, but who are also great at comedy. He has that range. Johnson was a prankster sometimes to get you to jump on his side to pass a bill. He might tell you a ridiculously off-color joke or drive you around in his amphibious car like he did to throw you off balance, and then pressure you and even bully you to get things done. And Bryan's range, you know, he did this in Trumbo too, but from the most intimate, suspenseful little soul at stake moment all the way to the big, larger-than-life Texan that Johnson could be. An actor like Bryan, you know, you need a guy like that going into a story like this.
And to take it from a play that was extraordinarily well received, both before it got to Broadway and on Broadway, to a film, are there models for that? Because that doesn't always work out.
It doesn't always work out. In this case, you open it up like Robert Schenken did in the screenplay. But what I love about Johnson's character in particular is that he would get in your face right next to you a few inches and put so much pressure. He called it the Johnson treatment, or at least other people did, or the Texas twist. And I thought to make it more cinematic, it might be go smaller, like get in there with the lens and watch this great performance as you forget he's Bryan Cranston. And same with the other cast too. Melissa Leo as Lady Bird, Frank Langella, the great Frank Langella as Senator Dick Russell, Bradley Whitford as a pretty incredible Humphrey. Yeah. You know, so it was to get great performances and be right in there in a privileged position that the camera can get you into.
Jay, as well as the political brilliance of Johnson, you captured the dark side, the really extraordinary insecurities. At one point, he said he was going to quit before the '64 election. Was that hard for Cranston to capture? Because he certainly did it vividly.
You know, those few days during the Democratic convention when he's actually curled up in bed, like you say, sure the South is going to abandon him, sure that he's going to lose the election, depending on Lady Bird to just give him enough courage to get out of bed. So self-pitying. I heard all that in the phone calls. There are these incredible, you know, many recorded phone calls available to us now. And you could feel that on stage, but on the film, you could really get a sense of how vulnerable he was, how great the personality, psychological swings were for him. And again, Bryan just, he's got it all, man. He's got that range. So I wasn't too nervous about pulling that one off.
Jay Roach, I should say, worked with on Game Change, and to paraphrase Donald Trump, we're getting sick of your success. Congratulations, another incredible achievement,
Thanks,
both art and commercially. Everybody's going to watch. The film is, again, all the way. It debuts on HBO, what we used to call home box office, at 8 p.m. this Saturday night. Jay, congratulations. We'll be right back.
Thanks so much.
Another Super Tuesday.
Another Super Tuesday.
Still ahead, another Super Tuesday.
It's also Super Tuesday way out west in Oregon.
Another Super Tuesday on the campaign trail.
You're watching Super Tuesday, presented by Hotels.com.
You like Super Tuesday, huh? Well, if you do, you can check out our coverage on BloombergPolitics.com. Everything about Super Tuesday, the results, the analysis, the reaction from both Kentucky and Oregon tonight. And also tonight on Bloomberg TV, Emily Chang talks to the chairman of Microsoft, John Thompson. That's on Bloomberg West. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to Al Hunt from Washington for joining us at Bloomberg View. Till tomorrow, sayonara.